Hello, I am Senior Deaconess Choi serving Emmanuel, Pennsylvania Church. And even though I'm so lacking as a church officer, how I've been receiving answers and what kind of position I've been in, I'd like to have this time of form with you, and I'm so thankful to be here. Honestly, I don't see any of your faces. I can only see my face, so it's a little more comfortable, but also a little strange. Right now, I've been commissioned as a church officer of Busan Emmanuel Church to the Emmanuel, Pennsylvania Church. And I've started this ever since 2006. And so for about 1996, so for about 26 years, I've been doing this ministry, receiving so many answers, and receiving a lot of grace and even tears. However, in all of these processes, I think I needed them a lot. And through many of the incidents and works that have happened, it's not a difference of what I did well or what I did not do well, but it was simply that God has been with me and that God has done all of this work through me. And that this is a process that I'm realizing that God has been leading forward. And they said that I'm a witness today, so more so than speaking about something I've done well or something that I've really experienced, I just wanted to be very honest with you in what I've experienced as a church officer. I wanted to share with you the things that have been put into my heart. And the way that you have seen me until now is probably knowing me through the mission home and the upper room movement with my husband in Emmanuel and Pennsylvania. And I started this beginning movement in the upper room movement. And I think I haven't even been able to do 1% of the upper room movement that Reverend Yu talked about. However, there were these mission homes, regional church, and upper room meetings, just one field where I've received these meetings and answers, not even a lot. And even when I started the mission home, I didn't know why I had to do it or if I had to do it. But the first thing that Reverend Yu said in 1996 when he came here is even that I was doing the mission home, and I didn't really know the meaning of it back then. I didn't know how to start it. But in the very beginning, Reverend Yu really emphasized doing the mission home in his messages, and I really didn't want to, because not only my personality, but my husband's personalities, we enjoy our privacy. We don't like to be interceded upon by others, and I think this is common for anyone in America. And because of that, the message didn't hit me, and honestly, I didn't really have a thought that I had to do this. And in the middle of listening to that message, in my heart, I just kept having the thought that I need to do this mission home. And one time, the Reverend Yu called us in this retreat grounds, and I didn't understand what this meant, but he was talking about the message of Jonah. Where it was a prophecy about the many children who would be returning back from Nineveh. And God says, isn't your heart breaking for the souls that are dying in Nineveh? And I heard that message as God speaking to me, how God has been guiding us in the America field, and is this not the answer God is giving us? So why would I be giving this kind of excuse and that kind of excuse, saying I can't do this or I won't do this? I received that as a message from God. And in the beginning, as I was listening to the message, I said, God, if you want me to do this, then I'll do it. And that's how much I've lowered my heart. And in the beginning in Washington, there was a missionary who was already running a mission home, and they were returning back to their mission home, or back to a mission field, and the students there were now moved into my home as the beginning of the mission home for me. So I said, why don't you just stay here for a little bit during the semester, and then afterwards we'll send you off to a permanent place to stay. And that was the beginning of the mission home. And honestly, in my state, I didn't really have my heart into this, and it was so difficult for me to have these students. After about a year and a half, I returned them back to the state, New York State, and I didn't know the meaning of why I had to do the mission home. And honestly speaking, in my heart for the future generations, I heard about it in Reverend Yu's message, but I don't think the message had become mine yet. So I wasn't able to really manage the time. And if I didn't like the students, then I would just give up on them. And it was just a time where I did whatever I could do. And as we were beginning this mission home and regional church, there was a World Remnant Conference in Washington, D.C. one year. And the main theme for that year was the gospel elite. And at that time, in my heart, I realized that this is the direction I must head towards. I held on to this message when I was opening up the regional church in 2003, kind of more full-fledged. And the students I invited to that regional church are the ones that I had in the beginning, the professors, their wives, and their professors' children. In the process of these professors getting their degrees in America, they were having children. And then some of these students, their parents have returned back to Korea. So now these students have to decide whether they would take their citizenship in Korea or in America. So there are some people who decided to come back to America and chose to have an American citizenship. And it wasn't very many people that returned. About a handful of people gathered back. And it's not as if I didn't have a mission. I just didn't know what the accurate meaning of a mission home is. And since I was always in college with these students, I just was always thinking about the college ministry. But these students, these kids of the professors, they were in their middle school, and I never once thought about middle schoolers, and they were not in line with any of my prayers or directions. So it was really hard, honestly. So as we were praying, I began this regional church, and in this process, there was a message that Reverend Yu was giving. He said that the mission home is the place that resolves the spiritual problems of the family line and the family. And I didn't know the meaning of that very well. My husband's family line spiritual problems, my family line spiritual problems, I thought of it simply like that. However, when I started the mission home, strange things continued to happen in my family. First of all, it wasn't a problem with me and my husband, but we fought as if it was. And there were problems that I never had when it was just me and my husband and my children living in the house, but we've had new problems now. So I can see that it was very difficult in my family, with my husband, with the children, and all of these problems kept on cropping up. And I didn't want to do the mission home anymore because it was so difficult. And then I received this mission from Reverend Yu, that message that the mission home resolves the family line spiritual problems. And I realized that when a remnant, one student, comes into my home, it is not them just living a life. When that remnant comes into my family or into my home, the background of their family line is coming into my family as well. And if there are 10 students in my home, then there's 10 family line spiritual problems and these children's spiritual problems coming into my house. In the beginning, I wasn't able to discern this spiritually. I didn't even really understand that all of these children were coming with their own spiritual problems, so I just thought it was me and my husband fighting or me and my children fighting. And it was so difficult and embarrassing to fight in front of these mission home students because I didn't understand what was going on spiritually. It was really difficult, and I was thinking very carefully, I wonder why these ministers are not able to do mission homes. Why is the mission home in America so difficult? And the very first thing I think I realized, it was hard for me to accept their spiritual states and spiritual backgrounds. When you invite a student into your house, you are not inviting just that student, but also the spiritual problems of that student, as well as their parents and their whole family line. Then you must be able to have the spiritual strength to discern that and break that down. Otherwise, the spiritual problems of their family line will be mixed together with the spiritual problems of my family line, and these very strange problems will continue to arise. So as we were doing this mission home, they came in their middle school and high school years, and all these strange problems were happening. And I'm not the one who raised these students. I don't know what thoughts these kids grew up with. But, sorry, the video is freezing. So I couldn't get any kind of sense of this. Sorry, the video froze. I realized that there were so many problems, spiritual problems being revealed in the family line. Everything except for just doing drugs. And I thought, I can never do a mission home. And then I realized, honestly speaking, that God is a true peace. And if I had just received... if I did not receive the grace of this, then I would not have matured the way that I have. If I had just raised my own children, then honestly speaking, I would not have spiritually matured like this. Because back then, I didn't understand the problems that I was seeing in my kids. So I understand the heart with which parents are raising. I wouldn't have been able to understand the hearts of the parents raising their youth. I don't think I would have understood the hearts of the parents that are raising the youth. And I think now, because of this experience, I'm able to experience a little bit of it and understand a little bit of it, having gone through this. Through my mission home, I'm able to understand kids that are not my own and be able to embrace these children as if they were my own problems, to go through hardships, to cry and laugh and go through difficulties with them from 2003 until now. Now it's 2022, so almost 20 years I've been living my life with these students. And even right now, honestly speaking, it's difficult. And even now, the mission home is not easy. And honestly speaking, what I've been feeling recently is, am I really doing this ministry correctly before God? As these students are looking at me, my husband, and my family, are they dreaming of their future and wanting to live a life like this? Are they able to have some kind of vision for the future? So lately I've been having a time where I look back upon myself more, and I understand there are things that I've done well or things that I did not so well. There are disciples that have come out, and Reverend Yu even has complimented us, saying that the disciples coming from our mission home are different. There are remnants that received great answers and remnants that did not receive answers. So all of these are various cases. Not everyone is good. And about out of 10 remnants, 1 or 2 will stand as disciples. And I think nowadays I've been a little more free from those thoughts that I have to do so well or that I have to do something correctly. I'm not oppressed by that as much anymore. What I felt nowadays is there was a problem in my mission home that I really could not handle. There was a student who was trying to commit suicide. He was attempting suicide in my home. I couldn't do anything more and I didn't want to. That was around 2011. And I was crying so hard to the pastor, saying, I cannot do this ministry anymore. And because I was having such a difficult time, the reverend met with me and said, this is not something you've done wrong. This student attempting suicide, why are you taking responsibility for this? We don't know what kind of thoughts this student grew up with in their middle school and earlier years. You are not the one who raised this student. So when I was so burdened with guilt, Reverend Yu said this to me. And even at that moment, it was a time for me to have this tremendous renewal of myself. And Reverend Yu said this to me. This is when Reverend Yu started to use the word imprint, saying the message that you have given to the students when they got into high school has not changed their imprint. From that point on, Reverend Yu talked about the imprint a lot. And what I felt that Reverend Yu was saying to me is, as I was saying and crying that I cannot do this mission home anymore, Reverend Yu was saying, before this, he was saying, have you ever been thankful that this very deep trouble and scar inside of the student is being revealed in their high school years before they go out into the real world? For me, I was shocked to think about that. I was thinking, why did this happen in my mission home? And imagine how resentful their parents are of me. But Reverend Yu was saying that this remnant is a true elite. And imagine if this remnant had tried to commit suicide once they had become an elite. But instead, this remnant has tried this to attempt suicide, not in a company, not with anyone else, but inside of your mission home, no less. Have you ever been thankful about that? And I told Reverend Yu, honestly speaking, how can I be thankful for this? Why would God allow this to happen to me or to my family? What did I do wrong? And I was really crying and screaming, saying, I can't do this anymore. And we ate and spoke for about an hour. And he said, before this student became a full adult, have you ever been thankful that this problem was revealed? And imagine if this student had actually gone into the world and really succeeded, then their life can never be turned around. But this student is a high schooler. And we don't know. Now that this problem is being revealed, they're getting ready to heal and adjust to this problem. Have you ever been thankful that this happened and this healing can begin in your mission home? And that has come into my heart because what is the word the evangelist is trying to tell me? So even though I ended that conversation saying, I don't want to do this anymore, after I came back, I saw in my heart I really stood before God. God, why did you allow this to happen to me? I didn't even have the confidence to face this child. I didn't want to look at that child anymore, honestly speaking. But I stood before God and I asked, what is it that you want me to realize, God? When I honestly asked God that question, I realized many areas where I was doing the remnant ministry in the wrong way. And I also misunderstood the sense of the remnant elite inside the gospel movement. What is the gospel and remnant movement that God truly desires for these remnants? I discovered it then. And there are two things that God allowed me to realize at that time. When we look at each and every individual, whatever spiritual problems they have, whatever spiritual problems they have brought into my house, am I able to completely and sufficiently bring them and accept them into my house and raise them up as a disciple? I was not prepared for that. For me, I thought it would be good if they became a good disciple and if they got into a good college. And honestly speaking, I was supposed to be breaking down the forces of darkness in their family line. And I realized I was wrong in that. I was not aligned to that. For the first time, I realized that, breaking down the forces of darkness in their family and their family line is this. And this tremendous background that I didn't know about this student was being revealed in the family, whether it's being revealed early or later. It's because whether the message was not imprinted into the child and it was revealed later on, it was a process of revealing those problems. But I wasn't able to see it that way. I just saw it as a problem and I realized that made me the bigger problem. And I realized for the first time that I was doing this mission home ministry incorrectly. So then what's important about this mission home is not about rising up well in the gospel or studying well or succeeding at all. If anything, even if I didn't say anything like that to these students and I was able to just pray for them and help them to worship, then that was my entire role. And because of that, I think I let go of some of the burden in my heart to do something well. And it was a time for me to let go of all of the burden that everybody in Tarakbang ministry knew me and my husband. And I realized a little more, what is the mission home ministry that I really have to do? And it took about 1 year for me to actually fully realize this, because my own thoughts and the things that were inside of me, all of my standards and my senses, I had to lay them down. And when I look at the parents that I met back then, the parents were not able to understand, even if I was able to understand a little bit. So as I explained the word to my parents, I began a counseling with the parents to understand what I had understood. As I look back upon that process I've gone through, I truly realized this, and that's when I received freedom from the mission home. The mission home ministry is not about giving some kind of message, honestly speaking. A lot of pastors have seen me give messages, or I've seen a lot of pastors give messages in the mission home, but I realized that is not the mission home ministry. So honestly speaking, I don't have that kind of burden anymore. I'm able to pray for these students. I'm able to bring them into the family. There are some students that do well, and there are some students that leave after such difficulty. If I'm not able to meet them, then I just pray for them. And so I think I let go of some of my ideals about the ministry. I didn't have the burden of having to be perfect or do something well. A lot of that burden has gone away. Now I'm able to kind of comfortably live with these students. And when I'm busy, then I'm just able to show them myself exactly as I am. And that's the life I'm living. And there's the one other thing that I realized at that time from the message in Reverend Yu's message was about missions. As I lived in America, all of the 237 nations and the 5,000 unreached tribes are in America, but I always thought I can just do American missions and world evangelization. Why do I need to do missions on the side or separately? It didn't really go into my head. I just thought if we do American evangelization, then that would be 237 evangelization, world evangelization. So I thought I was holding on to these terms, but there was a message that Reverend Yu came out with saying that for church officers, we need to at least hold on to one nation and be able to raise and support at least one evangelism or missionary there and save at least one nation like that. And it was a time when I was facing that really difficult time. I stood before God and asked Him. And just like I said, I realized something about the mission home ministry back then. Another realization God gave to my heart was about missions. Even as I live in America, doing American evangelization is rightful. However, even there must be another mission field that I'm praying for, a nation in the 237 nation beyond America. And I began to pray about this before God to give, so that I may save just one family, one missionary's family, one nation. And honestly speaking, I didn't know of missionaries inside of the upper room ministry. And if I go to some kind of mission field, I don't really serve or devote to these missionaries. And so I received a heart of wanting to go to the mission field. And I thought, I really need to devote, or who is the missionary that I really need to be with and help? In that process of thinking about that, there was the first time where the Panama conference was opened up. And because I had to take care of these students, the only time I could go to the mission fields personally is through the vacation times. So I was able to attend that conference, and I didn't know what missionaries would be in the Panama field. I just heard that there were some there, but I didn't know who I was. And honestly speaking, I wasn't that interested. But I did think that I had to go to these mission fields, so I attended that conference. Other people, they were taking a plane from Korea to those mission fields, but I have to go from America. So I took a plane ticket to the Peru and Panama conference, and I think I got a United ticket, but it was without a doubt from America. And when I got onto the flight, all of the people around me on that flight, right in the area, it was people that were associated with pastors in Korea. So even though they had gotten the ticket from Korea and I was from America, there was Pastor Kim next to me, Kang Tae-young, and Pastor Kim Dong-go. They were right next to me on the plane. And I was asking God to allow me to see what He wants me to see and meet who He wants me to meet in these Peru and Panama conference, to really see, open my eyes to world evangelization, the nation. So I was constantly praying that. And Pastor Kim Dong-go was asking me, hey, look at this. And he showed me something. It was like a 10-page printed material. And I asked him what it was. And Pastor Kim said, this is, in the Panama conference, this is the report given to Reverend Yu about the Panama ministry. And because we're going to the Panama conference, why don't you read it too, Senior Deaconess Choi? And I was reading this. It was the missionary Pacono in Panama. This missionary had gone into the jungle. Their church caught on fire. Their ministry had failed. So I was reading all of these contents from their report. I thought, as they're doing the missions with these indigenous people in the jungles, this is someone who really knows the spiritual background of the shamans and the different idolatries that are in this region. That's the extent to which I thought. And then when I got into Panama, because of the time schedule, the time difference, I wasn't able to pray, and I went out into the hotel lobby because I couldn't turn on the hotel room on. We were sleeping with other people at the time. So it was quite late into the night, I think past midnight. I was just in the hotel lobby, and there was a table in the lobby where there were a missionary and a pastor and one other person that were sitting there. And because I came out, the Yuonson missionary called me over, and the person that was sitting at the table with them was the missionary that I had read about, Pakono missionary. And I greeted them saying hello. And then there was the Yuongo missionary, and then there was the pastor, and then there was the missionary in Panama that I had read about. So it was just the four of us together and myself. And I was listening to what they had been talking about. And Pakono missionary said this. He referred to the pastor by first name. I guess they're friends. But he said, they're the theological professors in Panama, and they keep on asking me to start a seminary school there. And the missionary Pakono said they don't want to do it. And the reason, and then when they question why, they say, do you want to give the professor salary? The missionary said, are you going to pay them the professor salaries? Why don't you just start a seminary here using the Tarakbang messages? And Pakono missionary said, I'm not going to be in charge of starting the seminary. I don't have the money for that, and I can't take charge of that. And I was listening to them, and then missionary Yu said, Senior Deaconess Choi, why don't you help them out with this mission trip? And honestly, I was going around looking for a mission field, asking who can I serve and who can I help in the mission fields. And I didn't really tell anyone about this prayer topic. But you, missionary, you said, why don't you try devoting to this mission field? And so I was taken aback and I asked, how much would it cost? For how much does one professor's salary take? They need about 5 or 6 professors, and they can only cover one professor. And the salary for one professor is $200. So for 5 professors, it's $1,000 a month. And in my heart, so strangely, while I was praying, I thought I can give offering for about $1,000 a month. And honestly, I had already been thinking of that. And so when the missionaries, Pak said, it takes about $1,000 a month, I can't do it. And for first thought is that aligned with the heart that I had to give as offering. And so I was very carefully asking the missionary Park, how much do you think it'll take? He said about $1,000. And I thought, should I do this then? And I asked them this very carefully, and missionary Park said, don't do it. Because he's not going to start any kind of mission or ministry that's just going to start and then stop in the middle. So if I don't know when you're going to stop, Senior Deaconess Choi, so don't even start. Most missionaries, if you say you'll devote to them, then they'll be thankful and accept it. And but this missionary was telling me not to do it. And so I asked, why not? And the missionary said, I'm looking for someone who can do this mission with me for my whole life. I'm not looking for someone who'll just give offering once or twice and then stop. And I told this person, because it really hit my heart, that I was listening to Reverend Yu's, that the Reverend Yu's message, that the church officers need to have a mission that can save and serve one entire nation. That was in my heart. And I really was looking for a mission field to devote to. And if I devote to some place, then I want to do it for my entire life as well. I don't have an intention to stop after a few times. And so after these conversations, we left. And I understood their need. They understood my heart. And as I was coming back on the plane, I realized I had already seen through the report that the Pastor Kim had given me that the missionary Park knew the mission field, knew the spiritual field, and that this was a mission field that I wanted to support. And that was the heart that I got. And so because I'm a church officer, I had to ask my senior pastor. So I asked Reverend Yu, I want to do this, this, and this happened, and I want to support and devote to missionary Park. And I thought rightfully Reverend Yu would say correct, or would say yes, but he said don't do it. And I was so shocked. I asked, why should I not? And then he said everyone wanted to devote to missionary Park Kono. And so I said, no, that's not true. There's no one else who is helping this missionary. And so Reverend Yu asked me to look into that. That there are many people who said they wanted to devote to the missionary Park, but they had stopped or they didn't. And so I confirmed this with I confirmed this with a few people, and I got this approved by Reverend Yu, and I began to devote to missionary Park. And with 6 professors, we started with about 21 seminary students, and we began the Panama Seminary School. And I've been continuously giving $1,000 of offering to them every month, and I'm a salary worker, and my husband is also as well. So it's been kind of difficult to give that offering every month, and I didn't have any kind of ulterior motives. I didn't think this would make me more wealthy or that God would bless us. I just knew that the offering I was giving would open the doors of missions and evangelism in Panama and the Latin America. So that is the same heart that I'm continuously giving that missions offering to. I think it's been about 9 years, month by month. I've just given that small offering. And around 3 years in, maybe 4 years in, Missionary Park said there was another Panama conference and he asked me to come in. But I couldn't because I was so busy that summer. But Missionary Park said, you really have to come. And so I was really put it through a lot of difficult situations. I was able to go. And what the very shocking emotion that I felt is that the people, the teams, the headquarter teams in Korea, except for them and me, there was not a single Korean person. There was about 600 people at that conference, and all of them were Spanish people. The only Korean there was Reverend Yu's messages, and there was everything else was done directly in Spanish without translation, and except for Reverend Yu's message that was translated. And then at that time, Missionary Park was in Daegu, and there were Korean seminaries who were concentrating and receiving training from the headquarter message, and then in Korea, and then they would return to Panama, and they would do evangelism camp with the 21 seminary students in the Panama Seminary School, opening up new evangelism doors, and the people related to them were all coming to this conference. So about 600 or 700 people went to this conference. And I think only of them, 30 to 40 people were Korean people, including myself and those that were coming from the headquarters. Everyone else were native people in Latin America. And the seminary students, they graduated, and there was time for them to get appointed as pastors. And that's why Missionary Park had invited me and said I had to come. After about 5 years, after I started devoting to this mission field, and as I was sitting there in that seat, I really had so much thanksgiving for God, and I was crying, giving glory to God, and I realized this is missions. I told Missionary Park this. I just gave you materials, possessions, but you have showed me what missions is, and I'm so thankful for that. And even though the offering I gave was so little, thank you for not squandering this offering that I had given. I was thankful to a Missionary Park, so I greeted him this way. And in that seat, I helped one missionary, one seminary school in that nation. It wasn't even the entrance fee to the school. It was just the professor's salary. And I'm sure there were many other people that were helping as well. But in the best way that I could, I helped. And after a few years of that material support, it opened up so many evangelism doors and evangelism camps in Latin America. And now these new pastors were being raised up. As I saw this, I was so tremendously thankful and moved to God. So thankful to God. My small material offering, this small missions offering I was giving, was used in this way. And this missionary has done so much tremendous work. So I told this missionary, I'm so thankful. From the position of just serving or devoting to you, $1,000 really is not that much for all they're doing, but that small offering being used so tremendously, and that it became a way for this seminary school to be raised up, even in part, was so tremendous. And I realized this is the missionary, this is the missions of the church officer, this is the offering of the church officer. It was a time for me to realize that. So in that time, of the hardest time that I had in the mission home, I think I discovered the most important things: how to do the mission home, as well as how to do the evangelism mission movement. How I discovered about myself as well, and what perspective I need to see and raise the remnants in. And I really learned what is true missions through Missionary Park. I was able to see. So even now, it's not like I'm doing anything great. I don't ask him what he's doing well or what's going on in this mission field. I just pray for them and just do the work that I am doing, and I'm just continuing that. So from that year until now, I've been doing missions, offering to them 1,000 every year. So even when I was in Korea in COVID, I was sending it in Korea. And in that, as I see the fruits being revealed in the field, I realize the church officers' missions, the church officers' offerings. So even though it is so lacking, I was able to discover this. And the church officer I've been feeling recently is even something else. What I think about when I think about a church officer is when in Reverend Yu, they would give me senior deaconess or appointed deaconess, and I didn't understand what that meant even back then. But one thing that was in my heart is that the church officer is an important person, that I am the church officer of a certain church or a certain pastor, and this is tremendously important, something that I do for the rest of my life. So how I thought is that a church officer must be able to analyze first what kind of church they are serving or what kind of pastor they are serving. So yes, the church officer has to do offering and missions and do all these different things, but first and foremost, you must be able to know what kind of church am I serving and what kind of pastor is the one that I am serving. I believe that analyzing and discovering that is the most important. So thankfully, the church that I am serving, Busan Emmanuel, we are a regional church of Busan Emmanuel Church, and the senior pastor of that Busan Emmanuel Church is the evangelism Reverend Yu, who is doing the evangelism movement even now. And even though he is the evangelist in this age to everyone else, he is my senior pastor as well. So in my heart, I was thinking, what is the work that I can do for this church, for my pastor? What is the work that I can do? I used to have this burden almost about that in my heart. And then what thought I had is that church officers have to give offering. But only recently, the thought or heart that I'm getting now is that starting from 2022, I started doing headquarter ministry using my own money, doing remnant ministry work or the headquarter message or headquarter ministry or for RU. And the reason why I did that is because I used to think that the most important thing in my life was money, or was time, more important than money even. And I thought the most important thing I can give to my God is time as well, because I was a salary worker. I cannot give a lot of money, but I want to give my time to God. And so as I was going into this upper room movement, running together with these people, I was doing the RM movement, RU movement, and the RCA. And I gave a lot of my time to God. And I was devoting this time to God, and it was the best and greatest thing of myself that I could give. And starting from that 2022, around last year, 2 years ago, Reverend Yu started talking about the 70 disciples, 70 regions, 70 nations, and 70 tribes in the midst of talking about the 5,000 unreached tribes. And at that time, because I was working for the headquarters, I was even left behind my family, and I was in Korea for about a year helping the headquarters. And there was some difficulties in my heart at the time looking at these kind of things taking place, things that I cannot even speak about. So starting from about 2022, I was just working for the headquarter message. And in the past, there were mission homes where the non-believers, we would evangelize to non-believers. But there was eventually I realized that there was not a single non-believer around me. All of these people I was surrounded around was people in Tarakbang families, and I'm not someone who was working out in the field, so I didn't have access to any non-believers. So then when I received the message of the 70 disciples, 70 regions, I realized that the mission and the emotion that I had at the very beginning of the Upper Room movement has disappeared. It got to a point where I was wondering, where can I evangelize to non-believers? So in Korea, I was praying to God, saying, I'm in my mid-50s now, and at the most I can run for maybe 10 years. How long do I have to be working like this for? How long will I be working in headquarters doing this? There was a lot of inner conflict I was facing. And I was facing this conflict. I wanted to still find my 70 fields. I had that heart a lot, honestly. And Pastor Kim Sang-bum would look at me and say, as I was working here and there for RCA, Pastor Kim Sang-bum would say, Senior Deaconess, how long are you going to keep working for like this without resting? And as I was having this inner conflict in my heart, I told God, I want to go back to the field. And there's no non-believers anywhere around me. What should I do about this? And I was praying like that. I began praying like this, and there was one other prayer that was coming in my heart. I went to Korea around July for the WRC, or a remnant conference. And that happened to be a day that was devoted to the temple construction at the church. And I heard the news that Busan Emmanuel Church was doing temple construction for the first time in 30 years. And every time Reverend Yu had talked about the temple construction in the messages, I really put that into my heart, and I was praying to God, how much should I devote for the temple construction, God? And the answer that was in my heart is that Busan Emmanuel is a church that really has to be properly constructed. And the reason is because in the Upper Room movement, it will be left behind in the church history, and the church must be constructed correctly to raise up the future generation. And the reason I got that answer is not because it is my church, but because it is going to be in the history of the evangelism movement, of the gospel and church movement. How did they influence the future generations and the evangelism movement? That's the reason I thought about Busan Emmanuel Church more even than Seoul Emmanuel Church. But how is it that in July I went to America and I was giving the first worship with my husband, and it was about devoting to the temple construction, and for multiple years I've been praying, how much should I devote? And there was no amount that I was getting an answer in my heart to give. But what had come into my heart was, you need to give the temple construction to the point where you can see American evangelization. That's all I received. And if I asked then how much money is that, I wouldn't get any answers. Oh no. So I wasn't getting any kind of quantity in my heart. And so even though I wanted some kind of quantity in my heart, I don't really want to say that full amount here, but I had an amount that I had in my heart. So I was just saving up so diligently the money I had and the money that I didn't have. And honestly speaking, last year or 2 years ago, I spent all of that money while working in Korea. So even though I wanted to do temple construction, there was no more money that I had left saved up. And when I went back, I wanted to do temple construction, but in my heart, I really had no burden in my heart. I thought, in this moment, the fact that I've left America with my husband and I'm sitting here in this spot, it felt like such a miracle to me. And the message that Reverend Yu gave that week was the work that turned over the heavens and the earth. And I thought the fact that in this spot I can be seated here in this historical seat, I was so thankful. And I was so thankful And I had a heart that I wanted to give out of thanksgiving and joy to God. And the answer that I received in my heart after that is that to give the offering as much to the point where I can see American evangelization, and I didn't know the American amount for that. And then I got a brochure that said Remnant Ministry, Holy Mason, a secret squad contract. That's what the brochure had said. And I was shocked. I honestly didn't have that kind of money. But God said, give enough offering to see the remnant American movement. I had received that answer in the prayer, and the brochure said that that is $10 million. Last year I had devoted to give 1 million, but I had spent all of that money in Korea, so then I thought maybe quadrupling that. But then the Remnant Ministry brochure said $10 million, so that is the answer that I got. And so my husband was asking, how are you going to do this? And I was thinking, if I cannot do this, then I'll just sell a house, and then I can just do the mission home in the church. If we sell our house, then it would be about $3 or $4 million. But even if we sell it, it wasn't going to be the $10 million. $30 million. And we received the answer of $100 million. Even if I sell everything that I had, it wasn't enough to fill this answer that I had gotten. But I really wanted to give this. So I said, open up the doors that really change heaven and earth, and then I'll give this offering. So I asked, how is the remnant? So I want to stand as a witness to show how God is working in the remnant ministry. That was the prayer that I came with. And lately, now, the prayer I've been having full force is that in the past I was a church officer, but there was nothing that I had. And what I thought was most valuable was my time. So I want to sacrifice or devote my time to God. So if I have devoted the time that I had, I'm about in my mid-50s now, so in the last bit of my life, I want to restore the field again. The 70 disciples, the 70 nations, and the 70 fields, I want to restore them again. And if there's something that God desires, then I want to still devote as a church officer with my material possessions. So I was really, I actually fought with my husband a lot with this, because my husband has his specialization, but he's still a professor, so he's still a salary worker. But there are some the copyrights that my husband has, and I thought we need to make it big from these copyrights or these patents, and then we need to do that as missions or offering, or as offerings. And I said, why aren't you going to make money from that? So I would tell him to really, it's important to do the remnant ministry now, but we have to do the offering for the future remnants. And he said, yes, money is important, but the life movement is more important than that. So he's always going out into the evangelism field, and he's always doing the life movement instead of focusing on his business. So we would always get into fights about this, and I would get frustrated. So we really set our hearts on this $40 million. And I thought to God, I really want to give $100 million. But I have no specialization. I haven't worked until now. And my husband is doing this. So how are we going to do this? So that was the prayer that was really constantly in my heart. And while this prayer was in my heart, there was this fateful meeting that God had given to me. And the realization that I had was, why did I think until now that I personally have to do this financial movement? Or now that I want to give offering, I realize there's no platform for the money to give in. Since I got married, there's no way for me to make money. I didn't do any business. I was only in the home. So there's no platform for me to make money in that I had. And Reverend Yu has been talking about this economy of light, and I've been praying about it, but I didn't have any platform for the money to come in. So that's why I was only looking at my husband, and I was just, giving my husband a hard time to make more money. And I realized, why didn't I think to do this by myself? That's the realization that I received. And I thought, but there was nothing that I could do. Until now, I haven't worked. I have no specialization. So I was asking to God, what is it that I can do and how can I give this offering? While I was constantly praying this, even not that I was intending it, but I just ended up meeting with a business person. And I met someone who said that they would help me to start a business. And I had a desire to do that. So I told Reverend Yu this. That Reverend Yu, you're talking about the 70 regions, but there's not a single non-believer around me, and I really want to give this offering, but I have no money, and I've been given this and this kind of meeting. And so I want to start working and getting my finances. And Reverend Yu says, try going all into this for 3 years. Really challenge. And so until now, that was about 1 month that this actually happened. It hasn't even been 1 month, really. So I kind of let go of some of the headquarter work that I've been doing. He said, at least leave your name there and then give someone else the work to do. But I had been really going full force into what God is going to do. And I myself have not done business before. But at least in this way, if I have given my time as a church officer, now I want to give my money as a church officer. And so it's been about 1 month since I've met this business person. And it's been about 1 month since I've started training to start this business. And if I look in my Kakao Talk, I've been kind of renewing my image. I've even cut my hair to fit into this businesswoman image. Even in the past, people would say that I look so charismatic. And when I was in the RM or when I was in the RU, people said that I look so scary. So I had no choice but to grow out my hair to kind of soften my image and not look so stern. But now, in order to look more like a businesswoman, I wanted to kind of renew my heart or renew my image. And so I changed my hair and cut my hair again. But what I wanted to get across is that the church officers are incredibly important. You've received an important position, and according to the time, according to your age, according to the vessel of the church and the pastor that I am serving, I must prepare my own vessel. If the pastor I am serving is a servant of the Lord who will do world evangelization, then my vessel must be prepared to do world evangelization, and my economic vessel will change based on your age as well. In my 30s and 40s, it is different than it is now. In the past, it was a time for me to sacrifice my materials. So it's according to the time schedule and the time and the age. And as I was praying for the temple construction, God is the one who gives and God is the one who does not give. But I do believe that He will give. even though it seems like a lot of money to me, it is not a lot of money to God. And if He has a reason, then I believe that God will do it. Then as someone that the church truly needs, as a church officer in the church, in a way that is appropriate to a church that will do world evangelization, and a servant of the Lord who will do world evangelization, I will serve in the way that is appropriate, and I'm learning and I'm studying, and though I am lacking, I wanted to share some of the very difficult journey that I've gone and what I have realized as a church officer, the mission that I have received as a church officer, and the business that the church officer must have, the business that is starting for me. So I've communicated that with you. And even though I'm so lacking, please continue to pray for me. And within the upper room ministry, when the future generations come up, I would like them to say, I want to be like Elder Choi and Senior Deaconess Choi. And I think until now, honestly speaking, I don't think I've been able to live like that. And so I'm looking back upon myself a lot and really renewing myself greatly. So I think I've used up all the time. And even though I have so much to say, I hope that you will continue to pray for me, and that I hope that all of our youth students that are listening to the Zoom broadcast will be able to see the churches that they are serving, the pastor that they are serving, and the future generations that are looking at them, and they will be able to live very confidently as the role models that these remnants look up to and want to be in the future. Thank you.